What's up guys, Derek, moreplay28.com. Today we're going to be talking about Phil Heath saying bodybuilders are not getting paid enough. Phil Heath calls for more money for bodybuilders. There's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. This is an article by Derek Hall, the same guy who says peeled in his article describing guys getting lean. Is he a watcher of the channel? I don't know, but seems highly probable. With 7 Olympia titles on his resume, Phil Heath is one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. However, even he knows that the athletes in the sport are not being paid what they should be. Heath will be the first to tell you that bodybuilding is a sport that requires daily work and dedication to be successful in any way. Despite that, most bodybuilders barely make a livable wage from competing, instead needing sponsorships and other appearances in order to survive in the sport. Speaking in a recent interview, Phil made the case that it was time for this to change. Here he explained that the sport needs to change so that it can keep some of the best in the world happy and competing while being financially stable. These men and women, they put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and if we were to really write it down, how much money and time they put into their physique, they would be so much in the red, in the black, that people would say, well, how are we going to sell this? You must really love this shit because you're not making money from this, Heath said. The biggest thing, I think, is the lack of opportunity for athletes to sit at the table. When the magazines were going on, I think there was a lot more opportunity because you were getting eyeballs on you through the magazine. When the digital age came, there was really no sit down with all the top athletes and saying, this is a platform that we are going to make for you to make money, because a lot of you people didn't go to college. You didn't have these conversations. We were just focused on training and dieting because that's freaking hard, Heath continued. And by the way, I know the first conclusion most will jump to when they hear this kind of thing is like, dude, you fucking eat meals for a living, sit on the couch, train a couple hours a day, not even every single day probably, you probably take a couple days off, and you inject shit. Like, how fucking hard is that? But it's like, until you've actually gone through the ringer of eating like around the clock, like every 2 to 3 hours, cooking, fucking cleaning, it sounds like tedious and dumb, but that's so time consuming. And the amount of demand and physical stress that puts on your body to literally expend those calories and partition them and fucking use them for rebuilding and then breaking that tissue down and rebuilding, like, it sounds like, again, like, what? I have a 40-hour-a-week full-time job. I also train. I also eat. I have a family. I do this. I do that. To the average person, it sounds fucking ridiculous. But until you've gotten to and of course, I don't have the experience of being that big, obviously. But even as I've tried to bulk up in the past, I can already tell you that the amount of fatigue you experience can be pretty significant. The amount of stress you put on your body being on this much shit, eating this much food and training this hard, perpetually, is it can be taxing. Now, again, you have a lot of free time. You can be investing however you want into side hustles that could easily make you tons of fucking money. So for people to be complaining now that things are not the way they were when they basically could have a good physique and get handed a contract just for looking sick on a magazine, it's kind of paradoxical in that people are complaining when the opportunity to earn money is a fucking million times better than it was before. So there are some things I agree with here and some things I definitely don't. We were just focused on training and dieting because it's freaking hard. I think we're in a great point in time for us to have this conversation, but I think that we just need more dialogue. So I guess the before and after, it's crazy. Phil went on to explain that he went to a show recently where one of the female bodybuilders only made $500 despite the massive amounts of money put into training and diet. He believes that the sport needs to invest in the athletes more so that people like Shanique Grant will stick around and feel like it is worth these sacrifices. So again, it's like, how much are the promoters gouging the athletes versus how much is it just the lack of demand to watch this shit? You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's not popular. I'm just saying relative, there's a reason the open bodybuilders make way more money. There's a reason why NBA players make way more money than bodybuilders. At the end of the day, it's how many people have eyeballs on the fucking screen, the stage, whatever it is, how many people want to watch it, and what's the demand there, and then how much money is there revenue wise to then give to the athletes. Now again, obviously there's sports that disproportionately pay athletes ridiculous amounts of money, in professional leagues and whatnot, and bodybuilding, perhaps they're getting gouged, guys, the UFC, this is a big topic right now, but the athletes, the fighters not getting paid enough, despite the UFC, being bigger than ever and making a fuck ton. And you have, social media stars who make a killing just stepping into the fight game for the first time, just based on their popularity. But again, that comes down to, in my opinion, a lot of it is how much demand can you drive? Because at the end of the day, you know, the promoters are going to get their cut, the athletes are going to get their cut, and it's going to be proportionally dependent on how good you are at marketing yourself and how much demand there is to watch you do whatever your sport is. So if somebody steps on stage as a female bodybuilder and they spend thousands of dollars on their pre-contest cycle, all the amount of food, whatever it is, and they make $500, it's like, is that the fault? Is that like, you know, the show, that the promoter's fault? Or is it, you know, just that people don't give that much of a fuck? You know what I mean? I'm not saying people don't give a fuck, just relative terms proportionally to other sports, or even, you know, the men's variant of, you know, bodybuilding. Obviously there's a disparity in making it pretty obvious, like why there's a big, you know, difference in the revenue being accumulated for athletes and whatnot. But again, like, I don't know how much the promoters are gouging the athletes, but again, too, you're getting to step on a stage to build up, you know, if you win something, that is sort of a platform to market yourself better. You have all these free social media outlets that you can make unlimited amounts of money. I almost said unlimited amounts of money, like doing whatever the fuck you want at the end of the day. Like I can tell you right now, like there's athletes that literally have never stepped on stage that are making more money than Mr. Olympia competitors easily, like even just through sponsorships and shit. Like it's not a matter of how much gear can you crank and how big can you get or how sick are your genetics anymore. It's also about how good is your personality? Do people like you? Are you funny? Do you have good information? There are a lot of aspects that come to this that I think a lot of bodybuilders who are really like nostalgic about the good old days where you could get, you know, a fucking $250,000, like, I don't know, Flex magazine contract for looking sick, even if your personality sucks balls. Whereas nowadays, it's not like that at all. And you have guys who are earning more than top bodybuilders because they actually go out there and put the time in to put out content that is seen as high quality by the masses versus somebody who's, you know, I'm not saying bodybuilders don't put out good content. A lot don't, some do, you know, some put in the extra work and that's, you know, admirable. And in general, those guys, if they have a personality or are likable and it's not just, you know, they have a good physique and that's fucking it, you know, they will disproportionately earn more than all of their, you know, people in the same sport, like by a ridiculous amount, to the point that you could like come in last place and out earn the guys winning the Olympia simply because of your content and how much you're willing to put into it and how good it fucking is at the end of the day. So like, I don't really know if this is really a problem because it's not like I guess at the end of the day, if maybe you don't want to make content, maybe you just want to step on stage and earn a living through competing, but it's like, you know, life's fucking tough, dude. Like if you got to roll with the punches and adapt as the digital age kind of transforms. And if you don't want to put yourself out there in a social media context, but you want to put yourself out there standing on stage in fucking a string that barely covers your ball sack, then like, I don't know, like I would think you'd be comfortable enough to, like you're comfortable enough to stand in front of judges and thousands of people in the crowd and get pictures in high res taken of you. Like surely you would be good enough to sit in front of a camera and fucking talk or like train or something. But you know, we see the severe lack in output from a lot of bodybuilders, not just bodybuilders too, you know, people in the fitness industry in general that want to rely solely on how sick their physique is. And in general, like, I don't know if this is not always the case, of course, but in general, you'll see a lot of these guys that relied on their genetics so heavily, and it becomes very obvious in the lack of like broad spectrum development of other characteristics of them as a person. Like in general, they basically skated through life by being a genetic fucking elite. And then in general, I'm not saying always the case, but in general, I see complete lack of personality, lack of humor, lack of high quality information. They just fucking grind in the gym, do their shit, and rely on their performance / you know, physique in this case to, you know, get them what they think they deserve in life, or, you know, get rich or whatever it is. And again, I'm not trying to shit on these guys. That's a totally viable way of making money. But then when you complain, I don't know if he's necessarily complaining or he's just putting out there as a debate that you're not making enough money from competing because you're this sick guy. It's like, well, is there enough demand to generate the revenue to even compensate you accordingly to what you think you're worth? And why are you not just rolling with the punches and doing what you need to do to actually make the disproportionately ridiculous amounts of money you could easily be getting if you just leverage some of the other things even a little bit? So anyways, he believes the sport needs to invest in the athletes more so that people like Shanique Grant will stick around and feel like it is worth these sacrifices. I think it's really important that we look at this and say, look, I need to invest in these people so that they can actually do better. They're very influential, but it's hard to keep them motivated and keep them locked in for a long enough time. a long period of time. But when they're not getting paid, Heath explained. So it's like, are they very influential though? I see a progressive trend downwards of how influential big names are. You know, people who were once, you know, mega celebrities are being out influenced by fucking random people on the internet who actually want to grind and put in more work than them. That's what we're seeing now. And the same thing with pro athletes. They just want to rely on their performances to do everything for them. They barely fucking post on social media. They barely put themselves out there in a personal, you know, relatability context, in any context whatsoever. And it's reflected in what they're getting paid, in what they're getting, you know, the direct reflection of your efforts and how the public perceives you as your value to fucking world is reflected directly in how people respond to you when you're put in the public eye. If that was any fucking grammatically correct sentence whatsoever, I think you get what I'm trying to say. Like, basically, if you like make a social media post or whatever it is, like, you will see the reflection in how much people are resonating with you and your content and or whatever you're doing to propel your influence. So if people are less influenced by you because you're just a sick physique, like, that's becoming more and more prominent. Guys who are just big physiques, big fucking names in the industries based on their performance in competitions and whatnot, even in professional sports. Like I said, you'll see, you know, social media influencers who are entertaining, have high quality information, are creative. Other different avenues, even in these same overlapping industries, are starting to edge these guys out in influence overall simply because they're willing to grind their way to it. And again, I'm not saying you're not grinding if you're a bodybuilder. I'm just saying you have to be more willing to be more multifaceted and not just be complaining all the time about like, oh, there's not enough pay in the competitions. You know? Like, again, if somebody could actually break down the fucking numbers on a balance sheet and be like, look what proportion the promoters are getting relative to the athletes, and this is why it makes financial sense to, you know, pay the athletes more. Like, is this a case of, you know, where you have a, you know, fucking conglomerate mega company and the CEO is, you know, taking ridiculous amounts of money out of the company and then paying the employees the bare minimum? Or like, what kind of scenario are we looking at? Like, there's not really any hard numbers and it seems pretty speculative at the end of the day. Maybe Phil Heath has that insight though, and maybe this is a actually warranted discussion, because at the end of the day, if the guys who are running the show are basically, you know, reaping the rewards based on the fact that they're the only like prevailing high-end competition out there that everyone wants to compete in, and they're just taking fucking, you know, huge amounts of money and giving the athletes just enough to keep them like just happy, you know, maybe there is a discussion. I'm just speculating at the end of the day that bodybuilding is not yet like mainstream. The fitness industry has definitely hit the mainstream, but you see it's transitioning away from the big, you know, not like freak show shit. Now again, the audience is always going to be there for that stuff, but it's not like they've made a transition like, you know, the UFC has managed to do. But again, even the UFC, they're having this exact same fucking problem right now. So maybe Phil Heath is speaking some sense, and I'm trying to give both sides of perspectives. But for me, in general, from a money perspective, there's definitely no lack of money in circulation for the top guys. There's definitely the opportunity to make more than enough where you would not be complaining whatsoever, in my opinion. Shanique Grant, very young, bright star. She won Olympia a couple times. If she was getting paid more money, she wouldn't have retired. Now I understand that she wanted to have a family and stuff like that. God bless her, good luck with that. But I guarantee you, if she had a couple zeros extra, she might say, you know what, I'll have this kid, but it'll come right back. So here's Phil Heath with the fucking goddamn balloon arms and a full head of hair. Phil Heath is all about the money. Is he? As much as Phil Heath is calling for everyone to get a raise, this sentiment applies to him as well. In fact, he went on to explain that he was invited to compete at the Arnold Classic once, but things changed quickly when he asked to be taken care of financially. He explained that he asked to have his travel expenses taken care of to compete at the Arnold Classic USA. However, this led to a response from the people in charge suggesting that he was only interested in money. I never won an Arnold Classic Columbus, Ohio trophy, right? One of the promoters was like, Phil, you've got to do this show. You've got to do it for me. I was like, for you? Okay, you're going to pay me to show up? He was like, what? Heath explained. I said, when Tiger Woods goes to one of these invitationals, because this is an invitational, they pay for his flight, his hotel, his everything. You give him a signing fee. What are you going to do for me? And you know what he says? Is it all about the money, Phil? I said, that's funny because you flew here on private and I flew here on business. You flew here on private to Australia. Are you nuts? Heath continued. So the lack of recruitment is what I'm saying. I cannot stand that shit. So I guess, again, it sounds like there is potentially a situation where the guys running the shit are getting disproportionate payouts to the athletes and they're expecting them to show up to help prop up, you know, the success of their brand slash show just based on the prestige of it, whereas the compensation structure is not really there for the athlete that ultimately is helping making the show successful. I kind of get it. On the same token, again, I think there's unlimited amounts of money available for athletes too, and then you kind of have to think about, if you're getting invited to an Arnold Classic, does it help the Arnold Classic more than it helps you as a brand with your own personal brand, a guy, you know, winning a fucking big title, and then that sort of helps reinforce the credibility slash propel your personal brand, which then branches out to a million fucking things you earn off of, plus all of the high quality footage that's being taken at the show, that's, you know, put out to the masses too, that you're getting as a result of competing. I don't know. There's definitely a discussion to be had. And again, the numbers, you need to see a breakdown to actually make financial sense of it. And like, I can see the perspective from Heath where he's saying, though, you flew here on private, I flew here on business, and you're asking me to pay for this shit even though you're inviting me. I kind of get it. Phil continued by saying he wants to see promoters offer something besides a trophy to get athletes motivated. So for the Arnold Classic as well as the Olympia, things need to change. Because again, you have to consider too, like his return on investment for time has got to be significant enough to justify doing whatever it is that he is being asked to do. So during this time, could he be doing something else to progress his other business endeavors that would otherwise be a greater ROI than paying out of his pocket to go on a flight to this thing that this guy's inviting him to do that he wasn't even necessarily interested in the first place? Even though he's a fucking, you know, mega successful top bodybuilder in the world and he's rich, it doesn't mean that you should just trade your time for fucking nothing, just, you know, out of the sake of, you know, being nice. And it's not even about being nice. Like, this is, I get the business transaction mindset of this is, it's not really fair. Phil continued by saying he wants to see promoters offer something besides a trophy to get athletes motivated. So for the Arnold Classic as well as the Olympia, things need to change. I just feel like for the Olympia, there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. For the Arnold Classic, there needs to be a lot of conversation. At the end of the day, all they have to do is just sit us down, Heath said. Although he does not outright say as much, it seems that this feeling of being underpaid is part of the reason Phil Heath has been less active in recent years. It is nice to see him advocating for the athletes like this as a former 7-time champ. So I don't know if it is why he's been less active in recent years. I don't know if that means he's less active on social media or if he's less active as a competitor necessarily. I think that more has to do with the likelihood that he thinks he's going to win versus not, as far as, you know, how active he is on stage necessarily. Maybe he's referring to in social media though. I'm not really sure, but, or just, you know, appearances. Like, I don't know. I don't follow him that closely to even say, but so I don't know. What do you guys think? I can sort of understand what he's saying in his complaints here. At the same time, I also understand the disproportionate leverage that social media gives to these athletes who can then use things like these competitions to catapult their brands if done well. There are a lot of athletes that do well at these competitions who fucking suck at marketing themselves, and hence it's reflected in what they make. Because at the end of the day, the competitions is like a fraction, like a fucking minuscule fraction of what you could be doing based off of the publicity you get from the competition itself, catapulted into all these other avenues that you have to come up with yourself. It's not up to the promoters of the competition to fucking, you know, go get you a, you know, a deal for this, or, you know, give you disproportionate amounts of money. Like, at the end of the day, they're trying to think about how to be as profitable as possible as a business. It's not necessarily their duty to make sure you feel like you're getting as rich as they are too, you know? So again, I see the perspective of the athlete in terms of, you know, he doesn't like that the people running the shit are getting paid disproportionately more. But at the same time, it's also a business owned by these guys, and you can be as profitable or as not profitable as you want. If you want to just try and, you know, you have to skate that fucking fine line, that teeter-totter of keeping athletes happy enough to compete, but being profitable enough where, you know, you're still a successful brand. And where do you want to have that fucking fine line? You know what I mean? Because it's not like you can really, like, this is a business at the end of the day. This should not be necessarily as personal as it may come to be through, you know, dissecting these conversations. Every business wants to be profitable and make as much money as possible. That's the entire purpose of a business, is to be profitable, and presumably that's, you know, what the people owning the shit are trying to do as well. And if it's if they take so much profit that it's at the expense of their top athletes being dissatisfied, then of course, probably that's not the best financial decision. And maybe it needs to be a bit more teeter-tottered into the favor of keeping athletes happy and still being profitable, but just, you know, maybe a bit less. So I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. There's definitely a conversation to be had around this, especially with the, you know, at a smaller scale relative to something like the UFC with shit going on. Like, we saw the Paulo Costa thing happen recently where he's basically saying he's not going to fight if he's not paid more. because he can't stand how people are getting paid, you know, for boxing and shit, you know, social media guys who are just blowing up and getting paid, you know, multiple fold more than him, even though he's like a seasoned fighter and a veteran and, you know, fighting for titles and shit. He thinks it's a joke, and yeah, like maybe you feel disrespected, but again, it comes down to how many eyeballs want to fucking watch you fight and want to watch you do this and will actually pay for it. So is the revenue there to pay athletes more? Or the guys owning the shit greedy? Is Phil Heath greedy? What do you think? All the comments, all the algorithm, much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplacemordates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplacemordates. Facebook, Snapchat, not BitChute, fuck that place. Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic. It's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. I recommended lab tests and diagnostics to get your biomarkers assessed and any imbalances or deficiencies addressed by professionals who work through my clinic. Regardless if you're natural or not, this is not just for guys who are seeking hormone replacement therapy. It's also for naturals who are looking for optimization through lifestyle and dietary intervention or whatever it is that, or just checking what's under the hood. You know, it's not something you should be overlooking. Like, even if you're a natural who is otherwise healthy, it's good to stay on top of your biomarkers and longitudinal trends to maximize your quality of life and health and lifespan, ideally. Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas I designed myself from scratch. Anything else I'm associated with, recommended diet model for building muscle and sports performance, clothing, you know, that I wear in a lot of my videos, and anything else, it's all down there in the video description. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.